All right, so welcome. As Thomas said, one of the many hats that I wear at Adobe is as the PDF architect, which usually means it's probably my fault in one way or another when it comes to the technology and our products and the like. And normally, when I do these things, I normally get stuck in the advanced track and talk about something very deep and heavy. But I thought I'd take a break this time and try something different. So I came up with this title, many months ago when we were planning the conference. And so what I'm hoping to do today, and hopefully you'll enjoy it and find it at least somewhat interesting, is I picked some of my favorite parts of PDF that may be surprising to you. You may not know they're there at all, or there may be a part of them that I'll introduce, again, the back alley, some corner of it, that hopefully will interest you or at least give you some insight into parts of PDF you didn't know about. So we'll see how this goes. This is absolutely interactive. If you have questions or anything at any time, please raise your hand, shout out. Definitely want to work together on this. And I also will show you examples of these things as we go through. So just to put us all on the same footing, and you heard all of this morning, of course, Adobe, of course, created PDF in 1993, or that was when we first released it to the world. And in 2007, 2008, we worked with the ISO to make it an open standard. So we've been through all that. If you ever want a copy of any version of the PDF standard, one of the projects I did this year was we now have all of them going all the way back to 1.0 are available online. So if you can't sleep some night and you actually want to see how things have evolved, all of the standards are now available online for your reading pleasure. But if we break it down, and you'll see many of these things today, so I'm going to pick and choose throughout these things. But this is sort of many of the core parts of PDF over time. The imaging model, the tools to navigate around the document, because again, it's a document format. It's not just about pictures and images. Annotations and forms, things you want to put on top of your content, securing down the document, signing it, authenticating it, and of course, some more things we'll take a look at. But one of the things that confuses a lot of people, because it's been around for a while, and of course it was the predecessor to PDF, is PostScript. What's the relationship between the two? So they do share a heritage. The imaging model of PostScript was the original imaging model of PDF. That's been advanced since then. One of the core parts of the advancement, and we'll look at that a bit, is transparency. But also the fact that, again, PostScript was about printing on paper. It was about devices. It didn't understand the concept of documents. You had to process the entire PostScript file from page 1 to page 37 just to print page 37. You couldn't skip around. PDF, of course, very important. You could jump to that page individually, and you heard a bit about that in the keynote this morning. Also interactive elements, non-printing elements. So a lot of things have been incorporated into PDF that are not part of PostScript. So there's also very little of the language. Even the actual PDF language shares little teeny bits of PostScript, but not a lot. So if you ever hear anybody say, oh, it's just like a modern PostScript, it's not. They do have a heritage, but it's a very small piece. And PostScript was an actual programming language. PDF is a structured file format. So start with a good background there. One of my favorite features in PDF that I think in some ways is underused is something called incremental update. And this has been around since day one. So the idea here is that when you modify a PDF file, you don't rewrite the entire thing. You could, but you don't have to. Instead, if you add an annotation, very common operation. So you go in, put a sticky note on the page. The viewer only has to add to the bottom of the PDF. So we say this is our PDF file. We can just put at the bottom, here's the annotation that I just added. Okay? So we don't have to actually touch the original. The original remains intact, but we just stick some extra stuff at the bottom. And that has a lot of advantages. Obviously, it's faster. It's easier to find the changes as you're going through. If you're going to do a comparison between an old version and a new version, it's very easy to find where those differences are. And it's also technically possible to even roll back to an earlier version. So let me show you an example of that. So one of the very few, in fact, The only place in Adobe Acrobat that we do it, and I'm not aware of other viewers that do the same, although it's certainly possible. If we have a document here that has a couple of digital signatures on it, we give you the option of, and if I click here on revision 1, one of the choices that I'll get, sorry, it's not my mouse or computer, so I'll do it the other way. Okay. Is I can say view the signed version, so I can actually look at the original version here. And so if we see, this doesn't have the second signature on it. So it's actually taken that original piece and said, okay, here's my original version. It's intact. I know exactly where it is. There's nothing magical about it. And I can look at the two different versions of the file. Or you also saw we happen to give you an option to also compare them. Because again, we know exactly where the versions are. And that's just built into PDF since day one. Very useful feature for doing comparison and version tracking of a document built into the system, built into the file format. All right. You. Okay, so incremental update. Another thing that when we look at a page within a PDF file, what you may not realize is there's actually what we call 5 boxes that the file format can specify and that a viewer knows about when it thinks about the page. So if we look at this particular diagram, that big blue outline is the page. That's what we think of as the PDF page. That's called the media box in PDF terminology. But within that media box, within that physical size of the page, 8.5 by 11 or A4 or whatever the size is, there are sub areas that can be defined for various specific use cases. So one common one in the non-printing world is what we call the crop box. So for example, if we only wanted the user to see what was in the dotted line area, we could set a crop for that document, and then only what's inside of that area is visible. And that's useful if you want to have extra information. So in this example, we have what are called printer marks. We have some extra information about the document that's there for use other purposes, but the viewer should never see it. Okay, and that's why we crop it down. So this also gets confusing to some people because in PDF it means it's a non-destructive crop. So if you crop something, all that stuff stays there. We don't throw it away. It's to visually hide it. Okay? So that's the crop box. And then for printing, we have other things called the art box, the trim box, and the bleed box, which are very important to the print industry. And so those can each be specified individually or derived automatically. So interesting way of thinking about your pages and how they're laid out. Variable user units. This is something that got added very recently to PDF, back in PDF 1.6. So historically, we'll do a little math here. So historically, a PDF page could not be larger than 200 inches in one direction. Okay, that was the maximum size of a page. And I apologize for the use of American measurements here, but there's some adjustments at the bottom. We always wonder where this comes from. You always wonder where this comes from, right? So. Yeah, so I actually did the math. It's in kilometers for the new number. I forgot to do the 200 inches, though. So it comes down to the, if you go back to 1/172nd of an inch, which was theoretically 72 DPI. It's not, and I don't want to go into that whole thing because that could be a whole talk in and of itself. But the idea here is that we want to expand beyond that. 200 inches is just completely unusable in a whole lot of areas, especially in engineering. So if we had a way to multiply that factor and say, you know what, rather than limit my page size to that, what if I could say, scale this page to twice its size, 3 times, or any factor in between. And so this is what a user unit does, is it lets me go beyond that. And so now what you'll see is we do the math, the maximum size of a page is now 381 kilometers, which hopefully should be big enough for anything that you want to print. I don't know exactly what you would print that on, mind you, but you could now print something 300 kilometers in length. And PDF would happily maintain it and manage that for you. Okay. And just to show you that this really does actually work, so I took a very simple file, and we have a feature, if you've never seen it, if you put your cursor down in the lower left-hand corner of a document when you're viewing it in Acrobat or Reader, it will tell you the page size. So you'll see in this particular example, I just expanded it to be over the original 200 limitation. So you'll see in this case, it's very simple. I thought about taking it all the way up to 300 kilometer and decided against it. But just enough to give you an example that yes, it does work. It's part of the standard. It's supported by other viewers as well. But a nice addition if you ever need to work with very large documents. Okay. Color. Let's start talking about a few things that go into the model. When people think about color normally, you think about R, G, and B, red, green, and blue, because that's what's on your monitor. That's what things like HTML uses. It's what Windows operating system uses. It's the historical computer model for color. But I'm sure probably every one of you in this room owns a printer or has worked with one at some time in their life. And you probably had to change ink cartridges in it. And you know that the ink cartridges in a printer are at a minimum cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, C, M, Y, and K. And usually you might even get a few others. Totally different model for color. So PDF, because it needed to represent not only screen color but print color, had to support all of the different ways in which color could be represented in those models, both specific to a device, what we call device-dependent color, and those are device gray, RGB, and CMYK for the three different models, as well as device-independent color. How do you represent a color that can work and look and act the same on any device? Device-independent color. And then there are special colors. So the most common one here, and I should have brought up my favorite. Oh, actually, I do have my favorite example of this. I was drinking it today. So for those of you who don't know, the red that's in Coca-Cola, that is actually a special red. It has a name. It's called Coca-Cola Red. You know? But you can't just, there's no actual RGB value for this. There's no CMYK value for it. There is a company that actually makes this ink specific for Coca-Cola. Okay, it's a special ink. It's only available in their printers. That's Coca-Cola Red. So that you have to be able to represent that in a PDF. FedEx is another good example of this. So those are called separation colors in PDF, or spot colors in the real world, if you've heard that term. So 11 different ways to do color in PDF. PDF also does patterns, and again, we don't do anything basic and simple in PDF. So we have two different ways of tiling patterns, either with colors or without colors. So you can decide whether the color is part of the pattern or not part of the pattern. You can also use smooth shades, or sometimes called gradients. But those of you who have done gradients before, there's not just one or two types of gradients. We have 7 different types of shadings in PDF, because you never know when someone's going to want to use it. And people do, which is the interesting thing. So patterns, both types of patterns, can be used anywhere. So anywhere that you could use the color red, or Coca-Cola Red, you can specify a complex pattern. They're interchangeable within the drawing model. And so that can give you some very nice images and pictures that you might not have thought about. And artists use it, and we need to be able to represent it. So extremely important. Okay. And then I'll follow that up just with transparency. Again, PDF doesn't do things just simple. If you've looked at other transparency models, there's like one thing. You can say it's transparent, or it's not, or it's somewhere in between. We actually give you very complex models. There are, I forgot to write this down, there are 13 different blend modes. I think 12 or 13. Different ways to blend two colors together. You can specify if the transparency is on the stroke or on the fill, which part of the object is being transparent. You can group things together, similar to layers in Photoshop, if you've worked in Photoshop or other products, and decide how they interact and work with each other. So very, very complex set of transparency. And I know there's an advanced talk on this afternoon if you really want the gory details. But just to give you a hint at this point and point out, there's a lot here. And it does make for why PDF can do a lot of things and represent a lot of content that other formats cannot, because it incorporates all of the possibilities and not just the most common one at the time. All right. Fonts, and we're almost done with graphics, and we'll get into some other areas. Two things I wanted to point out. One, if there's a font format you've ever worked with, again, you can probably put it in PDF because we want to support what's out there. This includes things you're familiar with, of course, like TrueType, the original Adobe Type 1 format, and of course the modern font format, which is OpenType. So those are all in there. But more importantly, there's an old myth, or it used to be true, it's not anymore. So again, I just wanted to dispel that. There used to be something called the base 14 fonts. Those were the 14 fonts you could always guarantee were always going to be everywhere, and you never had to embed them because they were guaranteed. Well, fact of the matter is, the standard doesn't guarantee that. Okay? Standard does not guarantee that any viewer will have any font available at any time. So if it might, but it's not guaranteed. So this is why all of the subset standards, the ones you heard about during the 7 minutes moments ago, all require embedded fonts because there are no guarantees when it comes to font availability. Okay? Has not been this way for a long time. Over 10 years now at this point. So, very important thing to keep in mind, no font is guaranteed. If it's important, embed it. Okay. Optional content. I think this is one of the coolest things we ever put into PDF and almost nobody ever uses. Few of those, and that's why we're here. Let's try to give you some of these. Okay, so optional content. In the user interface of Adobe's products and other products, we call these layers. The term is very misleading, and it always frustrates me that our marketing department insisted we call them layers, because users would understand layers, but they wouldn't understand optional content. They have absolutely nothing to do with each other. If you're familiar with layers in authoring tools, it's not the same as optional content. The name really tells you what it is. Do you see something or don't you see something? It's optional. It's either visible or it's not visible. When is it visible? It's visible based on a set of criteria that you as the author define. Meaning, is it going to be seen based on the user's language? Is it going to be seen based on whether they're printing or they're viewing on screen? Is it going to be presented during an export process? So let me give you a couple of examples of just how this can work. So here's a very simple, let's start with, I just love this example. So this is a map of San Francisco, which is pretty much unreadable at this zoom factor, okay? And one of the things that's important to note about this is that even though it's very cluttered, what you're seeing is a very cluttered image, it could be even worse, because there's a lot of information that would be useful on a map if we were zoomed in further in. So you'll see as we start to zoom in, we start to see some text that wasn't there before. Some of this blue text that tells us where we are. If we get in even further, this is not, oops, come back a bit. There we go. As soon as we zoom far enough in, notice that the names of the streets start to appear, okay? Optional. It knows that I'm now zoomed in far enough that the name of the street would be useful. It wasn't useful before at 10,000 feet because it really would have made the map unreadable. But now that I'm close enough, it's extremely useful information. And if I go in even a little further, let's see, oops, go one more. There we go. I even now get the bus route numbers. So zooming level, zooming in, you want to get more and more useful information as you get closer to the content. Great use for optional content, applying a zoom. Another example, printing. When I look at this on the screen, looks fine, no problems. But when the user prints, oh good, this particular machine doesn't have a printer set up. All right, well, if it did, I'm not going to bother taking some time away. But what we would see is that in the print preview, the word draft appears on the printed copy. Because I don't want it on the screen. It's okay to view it on the screen. But if somebody prints this, I want that printed copy to go away with a piece of information letting them know this is not the final copy. And you could even have it be totally different. For example, you could have this as the screen view, and you could have a printed view that looked very different. Okay? You get to choose screen view, print view, export view. These are all optional criteria that can be specified to the page content. And it doesn't have to be simple. You know, I've been talking about sort of one or the other, but you can actually specify what are called expressions, visibility expressions. So for example, here, if we look at the two groups, All right? The text reflects the state. The idea being that I've associated the text with the states so that it can know on and off for any set. Okay, and so based on the user's choice or criteria such as zooming or export or print or language, I didn't mention language. If the user's in a German localized viewer, you could show the German version automatically, versus if they're in their Spanish viewer, you could show the Spanish version automatically. Language is another criteria that can be applied. So these all can be combined in very unique ways based on your requirements for your content. There we go. All right, so that's optional content. All right, structured and tagged PDF. So there's a reason I'm going to give you heard about this earlier as part of the PDF UA, so I won't spend as much time on the background of it, but I'll point out something, again, a feature that I like about it that's not used much. But quick history, structured PDF actually came first. It went back to the idea of how do you capture a web page. We had a project called AcroSpider, which I loved. I thought was the greatest name for a project. We captured web pages, but we wanted to capture not only the visual representation, but the logical representation. And this is where the idea of keeping structure along with content came about. And from there, we moved, as you heard in Olaf's presentation, on to tagged PDF. How do you actually represent a very rich tagging model, a very rich structure model to your PDF content for reflow, for extraction, and for accessibility support? And again, we won't spend, there'll be a number of sessions on that in PDF UA over the next 2 days. Just to give you an example, and I guess you can read it, okay. So here's an example of a document actually from the ISO, and it points out on the left-hand side, you can see headings and paragraphs and sections and things like that. Just that these are the tags, and they seem very similar to HTML tags on purpose. But what I want to talk about are, again, two, I think, again, very, very useful but hidden away parts of tagged PDF. So the first one is about abbreviations. If you've got a piece of text that uses an abbreviation, like DR, okay, so that could mean in English, obviously, doctor or drive. So if we have the string of text, DR Healwell works at 123 Industrial DR, and you need to now send that to a screen reader. How is a screen reader that's going to read this read this to a person who can't see it visually, get the right things? And the way you do that is by using abbreviation tags. So you actually identify, and you can look at this as a little piece of PDF language, but I tried the boldface, where basically all it's doing is it's saying, this is doctor, this is drive. And then the other thing that is also very useful is what's called actual text. So the idea for actual text, you may have heard of alt text, alternative text. Alternative text is useful for things like images. So if you have a picture and you want to put some text and associate it with that picture so that a person who can't see the picture is told what it is. Like, this is a picture of Ben Franklin discovering electricity or whatever it is. They can read that. But that's different from actual text. Actual text is, here's what I want you to use instead of what the user sees visually. And there's a couple of really good examples of this. My favorite one is for how you handle hyphenation. So on the screen, you're going to see a hyphen. So I gave an example here. I picked one for German. So classically, the word Druck, we want to probably pronounce it wrong, Drucker, I think it is. You guys will correct me. Did I do that okay? Yeah, close enough. Okay. All right. So it would be the classical way to hyphenate, which normally spelled D-R-U-C-K-E-R, but when you hyphenated it became K-K. But you don't want that. When that comes back out, you don't want the KK or the hyphen. You want it to come back out. If the user's selecting it and copying it, you want it to come back out as CK. So the way you do that is by using actual text. And so the actual text says, instead of that K hyphen, we'll put the C back in. And just to show you that this actually works in both cases. So here's Drucker. I'm just going to select all. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to switch over to Pages, because that's what they gave me here. And I'm just going to do a paste. And you'll see that we get the C back. So this way, again, it takes advantage of doing the right thing because I've specified it. And I did discover, I'm going to do the read out loud so you can hear this, although I will tell you that I discovered there appears to be a bug in Acrobat, which is my fault, so I can't blame anybody else. But it turns out that this will actually read it wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway, because it gets it half right.
Dr. Healwell works at 123 Industrial Dr. Drucker.
So it got doctor twice, and I don't know why, but I'll figure it out. But at least it points out that it got doctor the first time. So it does, in concept, work correctly. All right. So the idea is there. Okay, let's go back here. All right, so that's abbreviations in actual text. So I think that's neat. Viewer preferences. This is, again, another one of those underused features. If you're ever preparing a document that you know is going to be viewed on screen, specifically on screen and not printed, so it's some sort of online brochure or publication or the like, take advantage of some of these options to help the user. So you can choose, if there's a lot of bookmarks in this document, you can have the bookmark panels appear automatically so that the user gets the bookmark panels automatically for navigation. What page comes up first? If you've got a lot of front material and you want the user to start on the first page of actual content and not the table of contents, you can navigate them first. You can have you can hide various parts of the user interface, hide menu bars and toolbars if you want, again, your content front and focused. So a lot of things that you can control about how a viewer is going to present your content automatically to the user to ensure that they don't have to go out of their way to change zooming factors and open panels and whatever else, so that they get the best view of your content. There's some very hidden features there that come in handy. Again, this is all part of the PDF file format. None of this is specific to any particular viewer. Destinations. This is, again, something very underused that I think, especially in the world of today with the internet, the web, and the idea of interconnected documents, what we want is a way where I can refer to a piece of another document without having to say, go to page 37 and scroll down this far. Instead, I want to say, go to the ad for Fred's Garage, okay? Or go to the section on optional content, right? We want to refer to them by name. We do this all the time in the web using anchors. The equivalent of anchors in PDF are called destinations, and specifically named destinations. And these work within a single PDF. They work across PDFs. They also work within HTML. So if you have a web page and you want to take a user directly to a specific named spot within the PDF file, you can do that by tagging onto the end of your URL, $name equals foo, whatever the name is. And that's all, again, that's part of an open standard. That's actually part of an RFC from the Internet Task Force, of the IETF. So it's all standardized open standards, and it's a great way to help users navigate your content across the various models. Okay. Spend a little time on embedded files. Everybody seems to be doing okay here. If you don't know, although I suspect many of you do, you can treat a PDF file much like a zip archive or a stuffit archive or the like by embedding anything you want into it. You can embed any type of file in any way you want. What's interesting, though, is that you don't have to treat it necessarily like a big black box, although it's useful in that regard, too. What you can do once the files are embedded is you can link to them and through them, much the way you do any other PDF. So that if you wanted to have a button, so you saw those demo buttons I've had on the various pages, if I wanted that to actually open an embedded document, I could do that. It's not in this particular case, but they work just fine, pointing into files. Even just a basic hyperlink. If I wanted clicking on one of these words to open up an embedded file and take me to a particular place, like one of those named destinations, that works also. You can group these things rather than just a flat set of files. PDF also now supports groups. So just like, again, in a zip archive, you can have folders and hierarchies. You can do the same thing with your embedded files. And again, all of your links and everything all work and connect up. So very, very rich model for creating self-contained, interlinked content. There's a new feature though, so this is actually, I think, the only place where I'm going to tell you about something that's new in 32,000 Part 2. It actually came about in PDF A3, so it's actually shipping, if you will, now on a published standard, so I don't feel too bad about talking about it ahead of time. We added something in PDF A3 called associated files. The problem is, and it sort of got hinted at during the presentations this morning, archivists wanted to be able to incorporate files of all sorts of types. They wanted to include the original Word files and data sets and CSV and XML data and whatever it was that was associated with the PDF. They wanted it in the PDF, so you had one single self-contained unit with everything that went into building that document. And then, of course, what you needed was, again, ways to link the pieces together. So before this, you could throw it all in there, and you just had a big blob. You didn't know that foo.csv was the data that represented the graph on page 23. There was no way to connect those two pieces together. Okay? There was no way to know that this table came from this spreadsheet. And now with associated files, we have a way to do that. So associated files is a set of PDF, extends the PDF language so that you can connect any piece of content or logical thing. So you can connect everything from an entire page to an individual word or graphic or anything on that page to one of these embedded files that go along with it. And we've talked to people who have come up with all sorts of really unique things. So everything from the examples I just gave you, tables and charts, mathematical expressions, if you wanted to include the original math document or MathML that went along with an equation, you could have that in there as well. Even something as simple as like scanning and combining documents. If I have two documents and I combine them together, how do I know what the original relationships were? How do they go together in this new world, especially if things got rearranged? You can use associated files as one mechanism to put all of that logical stuff together. So again, it's another way to go beyond simple content to logical structure and figure out how it all pieces together in this rich semantic document. So no tools, no tools today, but it will be coming up. So yes?
But it's just a reference, right? It's not like the PDF content is being dynamically loaded from these files.
Absolutely. It is just a reference. It's just a link. There's absolutely no expectation that you would ever use that to render. Yeah. That's correct. Was that yours question as well, Joe?
You just said no tools. That was
oh, yeah. So right now there are no tools available. It's only been out, it's less than a year now at this point in PDF A3. There are validators that will validate it as part of A3, but nothing that will author it at this point.
So are those stored in the typical way that attachments are stored?
They're standard attachments.
Standard attachments with these references.
Yeah, basically the object, the page, the image, whatever, has a new key in its dictionary that points to your embedded file. It actually doesn't have to be embedded. It can also point to an external file too. So if you happen to be keeping your data set on a server somewhere, you can point to that. You can point to what's called a file specification, is the data structure in PDF that lets you refer to both internal and external files. So any file specification can be referenced. Okay, collections, the last thing I'll talk about for embedded files. One of the nice things here is if you're bringing together this PDF and a collection of information, one of the things you can do is you can associate metadata along with it. So one of my favorite examples is email. If you take a whole bunch of emails and you collect them together into a PDF, it would be nice if you had like an index of those email files. And so you can specify that within the PDF. And so the user experience would be, you would assume the actual PDF would be down here, but here's a case where you can see the dates and the froms and the tos and the subjects of your email and navigate through that rather than necessarily navigating through documents without any context associated with them. Okay, so very, very useful. There's also One of the things that the ISO committee actually worked on recently with Microsoft is there's something new coming in PDF called an encrypted wrapper. This is a way to take an encrypted file and put it inside of a non-encrypted file in a standardized way so that users who can't decrypt it get a better experience than they do today. Because if you've ever tried to open an encrypted file in a viewer that doesn't know about it, you get really bad, yes, thank you. So I got my own timer just in case. Okay. But that's good. So it gives you a better experience. All right, so let's move on to a few more things. Rich text fields. So many of you have probably filled out more than your share of forms in PDF files. What you may not know is that form fields are not limited to a single font or size or style or whatever. You can actually specify that a given field be a rich text field. And so your rich text fields can have paragraph styling like justifications and spacings and indents values. They can also have per character things. You can see superscripts, subscripts, colors, underlines, all the sorts of things you'd expect. And it's based on, in the PDF, what you see is a subset of XHTML, which is the XML representation or serialization of HTML. So very nice feature. When it's useful, when you need a rich text field on a form, it's there. Not a highly used feature, but again, can come in handy. Digital signatures. I'll spend a little bit of time on this. The things I want to point out, PDF's done digital signatures for a long time, but there's two types of signatures that are fairly recent that don't get as much interest as I think they could. One is certifying signatures. This is a great type of signature. It's put on by an authorizing body, if you will. So rather than a user putting this on, like you're signing this to say, I authorize this document, an organization would put this on to say, we guarantee you that this is the document that we are publishing. So in the United States, we have an organization called the GPO, the Government Printing Office, which is where all official documents from the US go through. And so when they publish a document, they put a certifying signature on it. So when you download one of these things, you get presented in Adobe's products and in others with a little message that says, this file was certified by the US government's Government Printing Office. So you know that it came from them, it's official, and it hasn't been modified. So extremely useful. We've been talking to other organizations and trying to promote this for a lot of different things. So that's one. The other one is a recent addition called a timestamp signature, which is also useful when you're dealing with non-humans. So in other words, if you're an organization who's ingesting documents, if you're bringing documents in like the archive that Frank talked about this morning, and you want to say, I got it now, you apply what's called a timestamp signature. So very useful for that type of thing. Annotations we know about, but I wanted to just point out, if you've never seen them, PDF is very happy to play different kinds of media in various formats, whether it's real media, QuickTime, Flash, audio files and MP3s, AIFFs, and the like. I'll skip the demo since we're running out of time, but 3D, you heard that earlier this morning. I will show you 3D. I don't know how many people have seen 3D in PDF before, but I'll just show you one of my favorite examples. Yeah. Okay. So you can see this little, it's this cute little demo, and it's animated. So it's not just a simple, okay, here's a thing, and I have to manually do it. We have a case where the 3D is playing itself and using it as a way to describe to the user exactly what's going on. And this can be controlled through scripts or through declarative types of models. So very, very useful in things more than just engineering. I really wish the one demo I tried to find, but I couldn't, is there's one of the things you can do with the 3D is you can actually combine video and the 3D together, and you can actually have a video playing on a 3D surface. So you can be sitting there rotating a sphere or a cube or maybe just a wall, and playing on it is a video. And I couldn't find my example of that when I was putting the presentation together. But it is fully possible in the PDF 3D and video imaging models.
Tomorrow I have it.
What's that?
I think I have it.
You're gonna, do you have it?
I'll
You'll-
show it tomorrow.
You'll show it tomorrow. Excellent. Well, you'll show it tomorrow. Good. See, I saved you. I didn't take your presentation away. All right. So those are sort of the back alleys. Some of the things that I think are interesting, hidden away inside a PDF that most people don't think about. Things I find interesting throughout history. At this point, questions about something I showed you? Questions about PDF I didn't talk about? Jan.
Earlier on, you talked about revisions and comparing different versions of a document.
Mm-hmm.
Does that also work in the tag tree? One major problem in the past while tagging PDF was that there was no undo function.
Yeah, so the answer is that because the information is separate, when you make a change, it's any change to the file. So if you make a change in the tag tree, that change also gets reflected in this new update area. And so, yes, if you were to compare conceptually, now again, their implementations vary, but technically, because you have two different versions, one with tags and one without, or one with tag set A and tag set B, yes, you could absolutely positively say, here's the differences in the tag tree. So technically, yes, but that doesn't mean that every implementation will get to that level of comparison.
Okay, sounds like maybe.
Well, I'm giving you the, again, I'm trying to separate what's doable from PDF versus what a specific implementation does. I don't know, for example, whether the Adobe's implementation actually does the tag tree comparison. I'd actually have to double check that.
Okay.
But, so I'm just giving you, so I'm hemming and hawing a little. Yeah, Michael, and then into the.
Leonard, you talked about all these different objects. Can you give me an update on geodata?
Oh, I didn't talk, I thought about that this morning, whether I wanted to talk about geospatial information or not. So what Michael is asking, one of the new features that is incorporated in PDF 2.0, and I think, Francois was doing it right now as his PDF 2.0 talk. For those of you who are interested in geospatial information, so like location coordinates on a map, as a simple example of geospatial information, PDF 2.0 now supports that. It's part of the PDF standard. And that works both in 2D as well as 3D, and that's incorporated into PDF 2.0, and it will also be a big part of PDF E2, which was also mentioned in the previous session. So,
I'll show it tomorrow as well.
oh, good, and Uli's going to show that tomorrow as well. Great, you're getting a lot of great play for this session tomorrow.
I'm doing the promotion.
We didn't talk about this ahead of time, I swear. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
This is the darkest.
Oh, and then yeah, go ahead.
This is the darkest, blackest corner of the dark alley.
Yeah,
Or the back alley. XFA.
yeah, that one I wasn't touching with a 10-foot pole.
Got it.
Yeah, not going there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this might be a bit outside of your purview, but
That's okay. Try me.
all of these things and use some of them in various contexts. The problem is always that the end user opens the file in their browser and they get the Google Chrome viewer
Yep.
or the Safari viewer or the Firefox viewer, and none of it works. Or
Yes.
it works in very unpredicted ways. This is not Adobe's fault or
No, it's
responsibility, but what can be done?
so it's an excellent question. So I'm going to put on my ISO hat. So obviously, I am one of the representatives to the ISO committees that you heard mentioned in the previous sessions. That is one of the biggest issues that we have faced within the ISO committee because we're sort of faced with two different issues. We want to continue to advance and improve PDF. You heard some of the things here today and others. At the same time, we have viewers out, it was fine when there was one or two or three viewers and we knew who they were. Now you have dozens and hundreds possibly of viewers, some of which clearly have chosen not to, and some of them have made explicit decisions not to support parts of the standard. Today, features that have been there for 20 years and they're not doing them. How do we get them to support something new? Fact of the matter is we don't have a good answer. We've talked about verification, like approved by ISO stamps, things like that. The problem is there is no body that can do that. There is no, to use Jeff Johnson's term, there's no PDF police force. There is nobody that can go around and smack the hands of the people that are doing bad. Really, to be honest, it's up to users. It's up to folks like yourselves to call Google and Apple and Mozilla and say, I need feature X. Believe me, I get these same calls from our customers every day who are facing this problem. Yeah, we hate it, and there's nothing we could, just as a PDF, again, forget Adobe, as an ISO person, I hate this because I can't make PDF better if I can't get viewers to support these great new features. Yes?
What about a manifest information on top of the file so that the browser can say, I support everything but, and then you can display like in a tooltip,
Yep.
this PDF might be not presented properly because that feature is not shown
Mhm.
here. That would be a solution for that problem.
So it turns out, you're right, it's an excellent solution. It's only if the browser supports that feature of PDF.
Yeah, but if that is easy to implement, then probably everybody would.
So it turns out that's already in
hopefully
PDF.
implement it.
Well, I wish that were the case. So PDF has a feature already in it called document requirements. Nobody uses it. I mean, or very, very few people use it. But in your PDF, you can actually state, my document requires a viewer that knows how to do 3D. So if you have a document with 3D, you can say, please don't view this unless you support 3D. You can tell that in your PDF file. But that's absolutely useless if the viewers don't support checking this thing. And this is, you would think, I agree with you, it would be the simplest thing for Google, and I'm just going to use Google as an example, it's nothing personal to them. If the Google Chrome viewer would go and they would look at this little key and say, oh yeah, we don't do that. We can't even get them to do that, or Apple, or any of these other people.
Well, you just started a new engine, so you could kind of hijack
Yeah.
the feature, and here we go.
Yeah, well, that's one example we could fix, but but you're right. It's very frustrating to me as
Maybe
well.
if Adobe publishes a standard code, which everybody can use in different languages. So
It's all there.
No, a code.
Oh, you mean the source code?
Source code for the viewers to implement that feature.
Yeah, we've also talked about going out, and there are a lot of open source implementations and committing open source. We may continue to push that, but yeah, I agree.
One of the
Yeah, Joel,
solutions
and
that
I don't know how
works-
we're doing. You'll kick me out when
One of the
it's
solutions
time.
that works really well for my customers is I have an action that'll put a layer on every page and basically tell them if they're not in the viewer that works. Because it just tries to run the script that removes the layer. If the script can't run, the layer stays there, tells them to go get an Adobe view. It's relatively simple. You run it as an action, easy to author. But it's the only thing I've seen that works.
Yeah.
Consistently works.
Right. All right.
Okay.
We- Oh, one more, and then I'm keeping you, and then I'll send. I think we're sending you to lunch. So.
PDF as a ISO standard. Francois mentioned in the morning that the PDF itself refers to 110
Yeah.
different file formats that are not part of PDF.
Yep.
And most of them, if not all of them, are not ISO standards. So what is the look from how the ISO committee looks at the PDF standard when it's referencing to the non-ISO file formats? And it's not just a case of file formats, also some parts of the specification, like I'm talking now about the version from 2008, transparency or font substitution. There are separate specific parts of the specification that is not exactly written, or the representation of the PDF can differ because of the specification and also because of the file formats that are not ISO standards.
Yep.
So very simple example, free type fonts.
Yep.
This is not an ISO standard, but the PDF is referencing to this file format and takes it as a finished something that can be changed or can be modified.
So, great question. So I'll give you so one thing that we've done, so one of the big differences in that list of 110 things that Francois talked about this morning is that in 32,000 Part 1, so in the current PDF standard we have today, a lot of those references are to proprietary standards. In a lot of cases they refer back to Adobe documents. But they also refer to a couple of Microsoft documents and a couple of other groups, okay, other companies. One of the things we have done for 32,000 Part 2 is that we have turned every single one of those for which there is an open standard into it. It doesn't have to be an ISO standard. It could be a W3C standard. It could be an IETF standard. It could be some other internationally recognized standards body. But of those 110, only, and I don't know the exact count, but I will guarantee you that there are less than 10 that are still proprietary. Okay, that was a very big deal for us in the ISO committee, was to make sure that this standard was 100% or as close to 100% as possible open, meaning that it was all based on open standards. So absolutely a big deal. Now, it doesn't make sense for us. The other side of that coin is, why do we want to base ourselves on these other things? Because it doesn't make sense for us to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't make sense to create a new font format. It doesn't create, or to take the text of the TrueType standard and put it into PDF. There's no benefit to that for anybody. But I will say that one of the other things that took place in 2.0, and I guess I'm doing some of Francois' talk since you were in here with me, is to ensure that everywhere that there was ambiguity, we fixed the ambiguity if it made sense to do so. So there are still places where it says people can do different things because it's the right thing to say, but we actually argued about every single one of those. So it's not like there's history. The current standard is just, Adobe said you could do what you wanted. Now we sat down as a group of experts, debated, argued, and came up with either you will do it one way and one way only, or it's okay to differ and here's why it's okay to differ. And we tell you why it's okay to differ. So yeah, big deal. All right, lunchtime?
Yeah,
Good, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.